In Florida today, dramatic testimony in the second-degree murder trial of George Zimmerman. Two witnesses testified that they believe the voice heard screaming for help at the scene was Trayvon Martin's. One of those witnesses is the teenage girl Trayvon Martin was talking to right before he was killed. And in Washington today, history was once again written by the Supreme Court of the United States.
A historic morning at the Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court has just struck down the Federal Defense of Marriage Act.
California's ban on recognizing same-sex marriages is dead.
Now once again legal in the state of California.
I feel jubilation. I feel fabulous.
Celebrations from the steps of the Supreme Court.
Has there been a bigger day for gay rights?
A confrontation between gays and police at a bar called the Stonewall Inn.
There is a law that says gay people cannot be married.
Anita Bryant has rallied thousands of fundamentalist Christians.
Every right to live a perverted lifestyle.
President Clinton has signed the bill that bans the federal government from recognizing same-sex marriages.
Victory for two Texas men who challenged a state law that made sexual conduct illegal between members of the same sex.
Our journey is not complete until our gay brothers and sisters are treated like anyone else under the law.
Day 3 of testimony at the George Zimmerman murder trial.
There is only one living eyewitness, George Zimmerman himself.
Prosecutors are laying out their case.
Testimony from a key witness.
Graphic evidence from the night of Trayvon Martin's death.
The young woman Trayvon Martin was speaking with on the phone moments before he was killed.
The prosecution's goal in this case is to pick apart Zimmerman's statement.
Case number 12 CF 1083A, State versus George Zimmerman.
More dramatic testimony today in the murder trial of George Zimmerman. George Zimmerman has pled not guilty in the second-degree murder of Trayvon Martin, claiming self-defense. Today, the jury heard from 19-year-old Rachel Gentile, who was the last person to speak to Trayvon Martin before his confrontation with George Zimmerman. She described her final cell phone call with Trayvon Martin when he told her a man was following him.
He said I asked him where he at, and he told me he at the back of his daddy fiance house, like in the area where his daddy fiance buy his daddy fiance house. Like, I said, oh, you better keep running. He said, nah, he lost him. And then he said, why are you following me for? And then I heard a hard breath man come and say, what you doing around here? I said, Trayvon, what's going on? Then I heard a bump, and I had a feeling it was a bump because the headset, Trayvon had a headset.
You heard a bump?
Yeah, a bump.
And what did you assume that was?
The headset.
Okay. What happened then?
And then I started hearing grass sound and wet grass sound.
What do you mean you heard grass sound?
Like grass, wet grass.
Okay. Then what happened?
And then I was calling Trayvon, and then I started hearing a little bit of Trayvon saying, get off, it's crap.
Okay, let me stop you a second. You heard a grass sound, and then you said something. What did you say?
I was trying to say, Trayvon, what's going on?
And what did you hear?
I said, Trayvon, I kind of heard Trayvon saying, get off.
Then what did you hear?
And then the second later, the phone hung up. The home shut off.
She also told the court who she believes is crying for help on that 9/11 tape.
Since that time, have you heard the recording, telephone recording, where there's cries for help and then a shot? Have you heard that on TV and stuff?
Yes.
Okay. The cries for help, are you able to say whose voice that is or voices that is?
Trayvon. It sounds like Trayvon's.
Joining me now, Faith Jenkins, a former criminal prosecutor, Yamiche Alcindor, a reporter for USA Today who was in the courtroom today, and MSNBC's Jonathan Capehart. Faith, what's the significance of Rachel's testimony today?
This is truly the state's biggest witness in this case. George Zimmerman is already locked into his statement about what happened when he and Trayvon meet for the very first time, that initial encounter between them. And he says Trayvon approached him, said to him something like, "What, do you have a problem with me?" and then sucker punches him in the face. Rachel is saying something completely different. She's saying she was on the phone with Trayvon the entire time. He was being followed. He started running at some point, and he says at some point to George Zimmerman, "Why are you following me?" And then she hears rumbling in the grass, and he says something like, "Get off of me, get off of me." The jury has a clear decision to make here. The question is, who do they believe? Are they going to believe George Zimmerman, or do they believe Rachel Jeantel?
Yamiche, the testimony she gave about hearing the wet grass, a lot of people on TV have been making fun of that since they heard it. But is what she's saying that Trayvon Martin had a cell phone earpiece, a Bluetooth earpiece in his ear, and that he, at that point, was actually thrown to the ground or on the ground in struggle with Zimmerman, and the earpiece itself is rubbing along the grass? Is that what that testimony is supposed to mean?
I think that's what she means. She basically said that she was talking to Trayvon Martin, and that in the middle of that conversation, she heard this aggressive, dominant voice. She said, a man that was breathing hard asked Trayvon, "What are you doing around here?" And then the next thing she heard was what she said, grass, wet grass on the ground. So it's pretty clear that she's trying to indicate, I think, that the wet grass and the earbuds fell out of his ear, and that the phone was on the ground within seconds.
Let's listen to how George Zimmerman's lawyer addressed the 911 tape on cross-examination.
So the question is, well, who is screaming for help? It's not Trayvon, is it? And your answer, it could be Trayvon. And the question, you know his voice so well. Was that Trayvon screaming for help, or wasn't it? Your answer, it could be. Like I said, I don't know, but it could be. The dudes sound kind of like Trayvon. Trayvon do got that soft voice and that baby voice sometimes. So it could be, I don't know, you know it's not. And that's the end of the quote. Do you acknowledge that you made those statements, those answers to those questions under oath and deposition?
Yeah.
Jonathan Capehart, what do you make of those discrepancies between the exact words she used some time ago in a deposition and then the words she uses today in court?
I think the short answer might be sort of either memory loss or recovered memory. But the key point of what Don West, or the defense, is trying to do is chip away at her credibility. We already know that Rachel Jeantel lied about why she didn't go to the memorial service for Trayvon Martin. Also, in the cross-examination, it came out that she lied about her age. And now we have this the clip you just played of her. What they're trying, what the defense is trying to prove, is that she also then lied about whose voice she said she heard in that 911 call. So this is all part of a system here of chipping away at her credibility, because, as Faith said, this is the prosecution's biggest witness. She was on the phone with Trayvon Martin up until the moment he died. There's no one other bigger than her, with the exception of George Zimmerman.
Faith, in your experience as a prosecutor, the inconsistencies that Jonathan just listed for us, how do those add up in testimony like this?
Well, the prosecutor in their summations are going to make a clear argument here that even George Zimmerman's own words comport with some of the things that Rachel Jeantel has said. We know from the phone records, she was on the phone with Trayvon during the time period where George Zimmerman was following him. Compare that to the timestamp of when George Zimmerman was on the phone with the police. The operator asked him, "Are you following him?" He says yes. The operator says, "We don't need you to do that." So she's actually, her statement about that is actually corroborated by George Zimmerman when he says, "Yes, I'm following him." So the defense can't completely throw out Rachel's testimony when in fact some of it is actually accurate on its face and not disputed.
Let's listen to her explanation of why she didn't go to Trayvon Martin's funeral.
Why didn't you go to the wake or to the funeral?
I didn't want to see the body.
I'm sorry, what?
I didn't want to see the body.
You didn't want to see the body?
No.
And why did you lie about not going to the funeral or to the wake?
I felt guilty.
Felt guilty about what?
By them finding out that was the last person who went. That was the last person who talked to their son.
Yeah, Amish, you were in the courtroom today, and you have a view of the jury, and so you have that burden on this show of trying to, in some sense, guess for us how that testimony was received by those 6 women on the jury today.
So throughout Rachel's testimony, the jury was leaning in to hear her. They were leaning in and taking a lot of notes because basically if they believe this woman and they believe what this young girl says, she said this is a young man who was followed and that basically was pursued and almost was basically killed while really just trying to make it home. So the jury seemed like they were really visibly emotional, visibly upset, at least in my opinion, and because they were leaning in and really, really trying hard to listen to every single word and write down what they thought she was saying.
And Jonathan, did you observe, as I think I did, a certain cultural disconnect between Rachel on the witness stand and the defense attorney cross-examining her and picking at every word as if she herself was a lawyer who should be able to speak in perfectly consistent terms?
Yeah, I picked up on that as well. I said that earlier today on our air, that I felt like there was a cultural disconnect between Don West and Rachel Gentile. But when I mentioned that, I was talking about, an adult versus a teenager. We have to understand that she's 18 or 19 years old, but clearly she's a teenager who's not exactly used to being in these circumstances. And again, I think Don West's manner and the way he was going about his cross-examination of her was about basically like a sculptor, trying at least to chisel away at her credibility. But there's one thing that I also found very interesting about this. Don West going up against Rachel Gentile. Don West was the guy who did the knock-knock joke as part of his opening statement. He's already coming in, I think, to my mind anyway, with his credibility in question about his seriousness and whether he's up to the task of doing his job. Now, he's very methodical and very plotting in what he's doing. Even during the prosecution's questioning, the prosecution's questioning of Ms. Gentile, he was popping up, objecting, asking all sorts of questions. He's doing his job as a defense attorney, but I have to say, if I were on the jury, I think I would be a little put off by his demeanor.
Jonathan Capehart, thank you very much for joining us tonight. We're going to continue with Faith Jenkins and Yamiche Alcindor coming up.